And then I hear people saying, and obviously I'm not an advocate for fossil fuels because I believe burning them causes issues, but I don't believe it's the CO2. I believe it's all those compounds that we've spoken about in the show, the mercury, the sulfur, that get into our systems in concentrated forms and wreak havoc, right? But we look at CO2. CO2 is the foundation of every single food chain and food pyramid on the world because it's what feeds the base. It's what feeds the plants.
That's right.
Plants are the base of every food system, and CO2 is plant fertilizer.
It's magic.
And this is something that some of your listeners can look at if they haven't heard it, but we're at the greenest period in recorded history right now.
Really?
Because of how high our CO2 levels are. The world is at its greenest moment in world history because of how high our CO2 levels are. Directly related.
So so why is everyone like saying it's the worst thing ever? Like,
because these IPCC reports, they lay out worst case scenarios that don't account for anything. But
they're trying to fearmonger, basically. And why though?
You know,
do you think about that at all?
I think I mean, I know I've heard some of the guests in your show, and I think this is a safe space to say this. I think it's all about control. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to these large governmental organizations that gained all this power during, whether it's after 9/11 with the Patriot Act and all these different components. And once someone has power, it's very, very difficult to give that up, right? They just want more and more and more. And that's what I think this is really coming down to.
Man.
Because
they don't want us to use energy.
Well, let's look at CO2 emissions from this angle, right?
Yep.
So right now, we're at 420 parts per million. If we go back several million years, it was exponentially higher than that. I'm talking 2,000 or 3,000 parts per million. Greenhouses are pumped with CO2 to make them grow bigger, and usually those greenhouses are about 1,000 parts per million. The ISS, if that actually is really up there, they claim that's at 5,000 parts per million. So if we're putting all these CO2 levels at such high levels, how could it be that bad? But then we go out and everybody's saying we need to cut all the emissions. Well, I've seen reports that claim 89% of annual CO2 emissions are naturally caused. So human beings are only accounting for 11% of emissions. So if we cut, and I'm not those
like volcanoes and stuff, right?
And I need to make sure that I validate those. Those are things that I've heard from various sources, and I need to really hammer those down and make sure they're accurate. But if that's accurate, and we cut every single emission in the world, and I'm talking all emissions, not just fossil fuels. I'm talking wood. I'm talking in Africa where they're burning dung for fuel. You cut every single emission in the world, just dropped it to a halt. 89% of emissions would still exist. So what are we doing? Why are we crippling all of our systems? Why do we have these children who are throwing themselves into traffic screaming, just stop oil? I mean, yeah, I get it. You guys are upset because you've been told these fabrications and lies, and big oil has definitely done their damage. I'm not sitting here advocating and supporting big oil.
Thank you.
They've done plenty of harm.
But it's a narrative we've been given.
We've been spooned.
It's like a
lie.
It's a conditioning. Yeah, it's a lie.
So
it's a lie.
Obviously, we need to put big oil and clean them up, and they need to do better things. And they've destroyed countless ecosystems. We don't have to get into that. But the world needs fossil fuels right now.
And they need good people using fossil fuels.
Yeah.
Good people using energy.
Because
more energy.
It's the cheapest, most reliable energy. And the key word there is reliable.
Fossil fuels, you're saying?
Because
they don't want people to use that.
The energy is stored. It's there. Right? I like wind. I like solar. I think they have their purposes. Do I think commercial application? No, I don't think either one of those is good for commercial. But personal use, homesteading, amazing.
Yeah,
they should be used in personal use and homesteading. But when you're trying to power a city and you cut down a forest for a solar farm, I'm like, wait, that's green?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And it just...
There's a big contract, you know.
Yeah,
that's what
I think almost every house should have solar panels on them. I think people should, if they have the area and they have wind, have a little turbine, right? And there's great small turbines now that aren't the big spinning blades that wreak havoc on the wildlife, but they're like tulip turbines, and they kind of just spin and they oscillate, and they won't harm the wildlife. So there's great advancements in that.
Wow.
But then again, we have to use batteries.
Right.
And batteries, people don't know the dark side. There's a great...
Let's talk about... Wait, before we talk batteries, I'm curious, the fossil fuels, like what would you say to someone like, well, we're going to run out of fossil fuels one day?
Oh, I would greatly argue that.
Yeah,
every other week they're finding new wells and reserves, and then not only that,
there's more than we know out here in this realm.
But the wells are replenishing themselves. Like they say these wells run dry, and then they come back 10 years later, and the well replenished itself. Oh, wait, are these dinosaurs?
Are you serious?
Or is so my father has this theory.
You're on one, dude. We're getting to it here.
There's a great book called The Deep Hot Biosphere where he basically explains that oil is basically emanating from the core, and it's actually not made from fossils. It's actually a natural byproduct of the heat, pressure, and time in the conversion. It's a great, it's an interesting book.
We're gonna get some people haters. I want to know what's that book?
The Deep Hot Biosphere. I forget the author's name, but it's called The Deep Hot Biosphere.
Deep Hot Biosphere.
Yeah.
That's interesting, dude. It replenishes itself.
These wells are replenishing themselves, and I'm telling you, you're gonna have people saying, "Oh, that's a lie," and I'm gonna say, "Okay, well, you can go and you can find out for yourself," because
it's hard
we've worked with the oil companies.
It's hard, dude, to let go. We're in the garden. It's existential.